Hey NFL fans, in this report I've got a very special treat for you. Joining me via telephone is former NFL offensive lineman Cory Procter, who recently conquered Mount Kilimanjaro, and he is here to tell us about his amazing adventure. Thank you for your time, Cory.
It was, I tell you, it was an experience, but me, and I'm obviously I'm proud of myself and I love it, and the whole, everything, all the feelings around it, getting it done is great, but it didn't compare to some of the people that were in our group that did it. I mean, we had, anybody who checks it out, it's waterboys.org, Chris Long and Nate Boyer. Chris Long, he was DN with the Patriots. They just won the Super Bowl. He started up, and the vice president of Waterboys is Nate Boyer, Green Beret. And those guys started up, but they recruited NFL guys and veterans, and we had 3 of our veterans that were on the team climbing Kili and giving back to this fresh water initiative. 3 of them are handicapped, and I hate using that word, but handicapped technically in some ways. One of them is blind, Ivan Castro, and we had 2, Pete and Kirsty, who were single-leg amputees. I know I was wrecked getting up to the top and getting down, and I was beat. So if I was beat, these guys are double that. So the grit and the fortitude that these guys shown was pretty incredible.
How did the idea of climbing Mount Kilimanjaro come about?
Random, kind of fell in my lap. I had, I'm buddy David Vabora, who runs the Adaptive Training Foundation here in downtown Dallas. He was Mr. Irrelevant, was the last pick of the draft, 7th round to St. Louis the same year Chris Long was drafted. I think he was a first-round pick. So they played defense together there. Well, they ended up being buddies, and I know, David and I got to know each other through different appearances and different veteran organizations, the Wounded Warriors, and a couple other different deals. But David called me up one day, said, "Hey, I got buddy Chris Long," and I didn't know Chris at the time, but he's running this initiative for clean water, and he's looking for a Dallas guy to help him out, and to climb Kilimanjaro in the process. So get on the horn with, he's got a lady, Anne-Marie Schindler down in Austin, and Nicole Woody, who kind of helped put everything together for the program. Get a hold of them, and, got to get permission from my wife to do anything. But but she gave me the nod, and all of a sudden I'm in Africa, and I've never been there before, and it was incredible. I mean, it was just kind of happenstance. Luckily that, David thought of me when Chris wanted a Dallas guy, and I'm lucky to have that opportunity. And I was straight up selling. It was funny because when Nicole Woody called me the first time to check it out, I go, "All right, cool. This sounds great. What's the next step? What do we got to do?" And she goes, "Well, we got to interview some other guys and go through a kind of a candidacy process." And I go, "Well, shoot, we already like each other. Let's just get it done right now. You don't need to talk to anybody else." So,
how long did the climb take, and what were some of the biggest challenges you faced?
Well, overall the climb took 6 days. What happened is, and we would stay at different camps along the way. We started off the wrong guy route, and there's several different routes on the mountain. And you have to pardon any mispronunciations or whatever, because I'm going to get something wrong. But we started off wrong guy route, and we had, I think, where we started, the elevation of the mountain, the Uhuru Peak, the tallest point, is 19,341. Where we started was, I believe, right around 6,000. So ultimately we ended up climbing a little, over 13,000 in the trip. But the hardest day, each day we climb anywhere between 8 to 12 hours. Going through bottom chunk was rainforest, into a little bit of more rockier parts of the mountain, into a desert area, up to Kibo Hut, which is base camp, and that was rough. I mean, we climbed up the Mwenze Peak. There's 3 different peaks of the mountain. We climbed at the Mwenze Peak, which is kind of a little more picturesque, and these different cave spots. And the worst part about the desert trek was they're like, "All right, today's going to be easy. It's basically a straight shot over to Kibo Hut base camp, and before we start the summit climb." And we're like, "Great." And we start off on this really chill walk. It was not a whole lot of uphill. We get in the desert portion of this, and you can see Kibo Hut, the base camp. Well, I can see why your mind plays tricks on you in the desert now, because that Kibo Hut looks close, but it was about 7 miles away. So we had to trek, and it was crazy. I mean, and there was an old plane crash or old plane wreckage that was up there from when a plane wrecked there in 2013. And that was some crazy stuff to see. And I think the last time the mountain blew, it's still active, just dormant right now, but the last time it blew was 60,000 years ago, so it created this big crater. So it ended up being day 4. We got into Kibo Hut after the long trek in the desert area and rested. We ended up hitting the trail up about 11 p.m. to start our summit. And the tough thing is normally summit night, I guess it takes like 4 to 5 hours, typically. So we hit this crazy grade, and we climb up like this volcanic rock and dirt and crazy areas, and we climb up the steepest part of the mountain and get up to the rim of the crater and hike another mile around the crater to Uhuru Peak, which is the highest, about 700 more feet to go after you hit the rim there. The issue was, the people we're with, we got amputees that are climbing this thing. So, like, we're behind Kirstie Ennis, who's a killer, and she's using walking sticks, and she's got it's a half step. To you and me, it's a half step for every move that she's making up this mountain. And with this prosthetic leg, it's taking her and Pete and Ivan, who's blind, just a longer time to do it. So we ended up taking about 10 hours to summit. And the funny part was is when we get up to the crater, that specific place is called Gilman's Peak, and we all hit a huge wall, and altitude sickness started raining in on everybody. At that point, we were all tired, miserable. We could barely catch a breath. I mean, people were, they're acting half drunk because we're not used to that. And the funny part was the porters and our guides, those guys climb the mountain 200 times a year, so they're used to it, and they're looking at us like we're a bunch of babies. This is like straight up The Walking Dead, the last mile around the crater.
How do the rigors of making the climb compare to the physical demands of the NFL, and which was harder?
I mean, they're both difficult in their own respect, right? I mean, you have, typically football or any other sport is more anaerobic, right? It's short spurts, heavy sprints, bigger muscle recruitment, right? Where you're going to have, it's a lot more conditioning aspect where, heavy interval condition aspect, while this mountain is a lot more aerobic, where it's a lot longer, right? Longer prolonged bursts, where not, they eat away at your calories a lot more. And so it's hard to compare the two. This is definitely up there in terms of difficulty, I would say. Just being in the NFL, you have some of the most grueling two-a-days and games and practices that you go through, especially you get with like Parcells and Bill Belichick and those kind of folks that like to beat up guys. It was a lot of fun, but then we hit that summit night when you're hitting a whole different grade of mountain that you're climbing up in a thinner atmosphere, right, with the elevation. And I mean, like, you're straight up praying a lot of times on the mountain. I'm like, give me some strength to keep going on this, because I very much want to quit. Every one of us wanted to quit at different points. And it was like, okay. And it was, what was really cool was the porters and our guides, they sit there. They do it so much that it was almost like, hearing an old ship. Like, people would pass time, sing songs to pass time. So, we're climbing 10 hours up in the mountain in the middle of the night, only in the moonlight. And these guys are sitting here singing songs to keep moving. It was crazy, but it was cool at the same time, because, I mean, it's almost spiritual. It gets to a point where it's almost spiritual, right? Because you're asking for help to keep moving. You need each other to lean on to keep moving. Ivan, who's blind, has to physically hold on to somebody, and you have to talk them through it. His kind of seeing eye dog, essentially called Fred, one of our other guys, he passed out at 17,000 feet and had to turn back. He keeled over on the side of the mountain. I mean, and this guy was amazing, but, you don't know how anyone's body is going to react to the elevation, and his, he conked over and blacked out, so he had to go back down. So Nick Hardwick, who's a former center with San Diego, and Luis Castillo, who's a DN with San Diego, they took over Ivan, and they're sitting there guiding him up the mountain the whole time. I mean, that stuff is is really good because, you know, sometimes just hearing those songs or hearing those words and you know, hearing someone else's voice helps you keep moving.
Many people have died attempting to ascend Mount Kilimanjaro, including 25 people, according to Wikipedia, from 1996 to 2003. Did you consider the great risk of death, and if so, how did you overcome those fears?
Yeah, to be honest, I didn't read up on that. I had, before climbing the mountain, I had a couple of people that are like, they were seriously worried about it. They're like, you know, that's climbing a mountain. That's, people die on that thing. And they're like, don't, you know, you're a big guy. You're not made to be that high. And it was cool about that was that they said at least our guides anyway, they said I was the second. I was one of the biggest guys they've ever climbed. The only other bigger guy was about my weight, about 275. You know, but I didn't look into that a whole lot. I mean, it got you a little nervous when you're standing up there on the crater and you see the grade, the mountainside that you just climbed up, right? And then we got on the inside of the crater where we got to climb up to Uhuru Peak to the rest of the way, and this elevation is kind of sinking into you. So all of a sudden your brain's, you know, swelling and it's constricted, and you have this like crappy drunk feeling, and there's the edge of the crater right there. I guess some of the thoughts start rolling in your head like, oh, geez, like I could fall over this real fast, but I'm you know, you kind of, it sounds corny, but you kind of creep into your head. You're like, I'm not doing that. I got a wife and a baby girl I want to get home to, you know? So you start thinking about that stuff, and you're like, all right, and you start focusing in a lot more and getting a little more determined in your own head to focus on the next step in front of you. But I don't know, I just think it was kind of a cool calling where you get stuff dropped in your lap like that. It's on purpose. It's never by happenstance, I don't think. But you know, something like that calls to you, and you get an opportunity to jump on it, especially with a group of people that I was with. We all gelled really well. Some pretty phenomenal characters in this group, just getting together to do it for a cause and getting a perspective on a different country and other people's problems. You know, I mean, shoot, over there, we're helping build these wells, which is fantastic. You know, we're putting a small dent in the problem to help it. But, I mean, there's, you know, over there where we're at, there's people living in mud huts, and these are legitimate, like, National Geographic pictures that you're living in right now, and where they fight for food, water, and shelter every day. One of the guys we were with, who was a big miner over there, was telling us, last week, the Maasai people, you know, are natives there, and he was telling us just the week previous that his guys went and helped out a group of ladies in this tribe because one of the ladies got attacked by a leper, ended up getting eaten by the leper, like she was gone. That was it. I mean, those are real threats. I mean, it's amazing to see the wildlife and giraffes and zebras and everything we saw there, but you're like, holy cow, this is a totally different place than what we live in America. You start thinking about some of those things, and it's worth making the trip and a little bit of risk.
At over 19,000 feet, you had the opportunity to actually see the curvature of the Earth. Describe that experience.
Well, besides feeling like garbage, we got this out and sat down, and I'm sitting there eating combos and junk food, just try to feel better. But I mean, we're up there, and you see these massive glaciers, and just being able to see the land, kind of like God's landscape before your eyes, something like that it's amazing. And you start, I don't know, for me, it really hit emotionally a little bit because, you know, you start thinking about, I don't know how spiritual anybody else is listening to it, but it's a great place to, you know, say a little prayer and count your blessings. And I mean, just, you know, my nephew who passed a couple years ago jumps into my head. So I started getting a little emotional, started thinking about him and my family and my wife and daughter and everything, but, you know, the things that matter and how incredible this landscape is. And, I mean, that's, for me, that's what kind of started happening is that the good things start popping into my head and just realizing, you know, what we have, the gifts that we have, and appreciating those.
Of all of your accomplishments, an NFL offensive lineman, a rock star, How does you conquering Mount Kilimanjaro compare to all of your other achievements?
That's right up on top, right up there with those things. I mean, the rock band stuff, that's a lot of fun. I mean, that's, when it comes down to it, it's right. It's a lot about the relationships that you make in the process. Do that, and the trek that we made, that's definitely one of my, I think, to me, one of my lifetime achievements, even though it wasn't necessarily a bucket list item to begin with. To do that, to say that I've done that, in my own mind, know that we did it. I mean, it's right up there along with the NFL. It's pretty amazing. It's pretty awesome. That's what's so neat, right? I mean, it's seeing those communities doing the climb, and you're working up to it before the trip. You get all excited because you're looking at pictures and videos, and you're like, holy cow, that looks crazy. And then, getting to them. I say we're joking because they make us start the summit climb at night. I think it's because so you don't look at the actual grade, how steep it is. Otherwise, I think everybody would be turning back. But we got up to Gilman's Peak, and you're looking down this mountainside like, holy cow, we just climbed this thing. And then, we go to Huru, and we start coming back down from the summit, and I think we get back down to 9,000 feet, to a point where we were looking while we were climbing, looking at the mountain like we were climbing. So the whole trek up, you're looking at this thing like, how are we going to do this? Right? Like, this thing is humongous. There's no way we're going to make it up. And two, back down at 9,000 feet, looking back at the mountain like, man, we were just up there. like I can't, I mean, like, it's surreal even to think about that. Yeah, I mean, you have to experience and sit up top, and it's amazing. But even then, it's kind of this, like, I can't believe that happened, like we were even there. You still look back in the mountain. I look back at the pictures right now, and I'm like, it's a mountain. They call it a dang mountain for a reason, and we're on top of that thing.
Before we close out, Cory, I do have one football question. Should the Dallas Cowboys keep Tony Romo?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's, as much as I love Tony, I mean, talking about team decisions, I mean, he's such a huge cap hit, and has such a huge price tag on his head. That's, that's major starter money. And that's not stuff you pay a backup. And, right now it's already shifted to Dak's team. And he said that earlier in his press conference last season. But, you're at a point where you need to start. You found a guy in Dak, which is fantastic. Now you need to find some other guys underneath him. Because, I mean, just like Tony has been the guy, been the leader, how many times has he gotten hurt? You got to have somebody that can step in. So I wish it wasn't the case, but, team-wise and what's best for the organization, they need to let him go and find ways to amp up the other spots on the team.